be properly managed, even if whether or not you have money, endless supply of it, you should still take a fairly deliberate approach to take steps toward compliance. And generally speaking, I have noticed that as long as you can prove that you are taking steps to become compliant and you have a plan and projections as to where you will be, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, you will be looked upon favorably. I hope that answers your question.
Not quite sure you answered it. My problem is that I've reached out to an attorney 3 weeks ago, who seemed not to understand the data composition. So I don't understand. I mean, I'm asking, who do I lean to? I know you said let's ask someone for help. Who do we go to? I'm speaking as a small enterprise, and I do huge business with the Europeans. A typical example, when the 78 was displaying stupidness, in January lost 126 people because of the South Coast Surge, and that's out of London alone. So I'm asking today, who do I stress out to? Who do I ask a question? Who do I ask assist?
No, you raise a very valid point. I mean, there's not any one entity that you should or could go to, but I would think in Barbados, for example, these sorts of things present the opportunity and obligation for example, the Business Facilitation Unit in government, Small Business Association. These are the institutions that now have to be. Well, I'm not here to bash them or anything. I'm saying what they ought to be doing. Oh, there. Yeah, fair point. Yeah. So, but the point I'm making is this thing spans across all sectors and every aspect of our life in Barbados. Now we must now acquaint ourselves with the regulation of GDPR. So to answer your question, everybody has to start doing some homework. That's the point. Because the truth of it is, the persons in our country and region, this is not a blame game here now, who are supposed to know about GDPR, up to January, they even know the four letters in the acronym, far less what it is. And it is sad, but that's the reality. So what do we do now after the horse has got up the stable? We have to now try to pull it back and ride it and win the race, okay? So, as I said, we have to read, get involved, come to forums like this. BIPA, you guys play a critical role in the dissemination of information. And as Lorenzo said, regional institutions and institutions who have that mandate need to also sensitize the citizens on how they need to become involved in this thing. I mean, if you are starting a business now through the Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme, the YES should have this as a component of their training manual. Because young entrepreneurs doing business with Europe or Europeans coming here must not be caught blindsided and shoot, what's GDPR? You understand? Because this can wipe out all of the gains that businesses and the economy and the country are trying to achieve. So it must be now everybody's business. Just like how we prepared for all the different things in the past, this must now be on the agenda. And I am actually going to call on the new administration of Barbados to actually pass or update, well, not update because it's not in force, to actually implement a comprehensive data protection act in Parliament using this as a guide. Very, very simple. And it will serve, as I said before in my presentation, it will serve as a vehicle for foreign investors who are looking to do business in Barbados and the Caribbean to come. Because one of the things that the Europeans and companies are now doing through the certification of GDPR is say, look, I am certified GDPR, come do business with me. Because citizens are now looking to see which one of you are the best in terms of ensuring my data is going to be protected. So, as I said, I think you made that point. Use it as an opportunity now for business, not just at a domestic level, but a regional, international level. If we can get it right at the country level and have a law forcing our businesses into this, when you start a business, you are already ahead of the curve. So one of the tick boxes then, if you want to register a company or business or incorporation, be GDPR compliant. So that when you hit the road, you don't have to now worry, oh, I have to go and do this. That must be part of the new Barbados dispensation of doing business. All right? So that's how I hope that answers your question in some way, shape, or form. Yeah?
Yes, I just wanted to add here too that, yes, who do you go to at this point in time as it relates to handling the GDPR going forward with your business. We in the association, we are working, this is one of the processes that we are taking, and we are aiming to address that issue directly as soon as possible. And Shad has rightly suggested that submissions will be made to the current administration going forward.
I also want to add, we don't live in Barbados 1960 anymore. We live in a Barbados where, you alluded to it, where not everyone that's supposed to know. But how do you put something like this on the agenda? Chad can write. I know Chad's influence. However, this is an age where citizen empowerment comes from people such as yourself writing. We have a technology minister now. For the first time, the government has identified some person specifically dealing with technology and science. All right? So therefore, right, the incumbent is on you in this audience to write the minister. Right now, she should be flooded with letters saying this should be your number one priority for the administration of Ms. Motley. Bar none. Because short of this, okay, and remember, while we are saying that it's not a technology issue, someone must still champion it. Because it could be championed from the IT department, but not necessarily only in the IT department, because it can't be. But we have a situation where we need a champion. Now, and what I mean by that is, I hope that this is not the end of the conversation, that this is just the start, okay? And that means that when we go from here, we tell our work colleagues, you would come to this meeting, sir, and hear a perspective that maybe you didn't have before, and tell your other colleagues, look, why am I not hearing my government talk about this? Because, right, if it's not certain things, you find that governments don't put it on the national agenda. Let's be realistic. It has to come from you, right? The idea that you're going to leave it up to Chad or myself or BIPA alone to do it, it is a risky thing, hoping that it connects. But when everyone in here says, you know what, it might not be what we call a vote horse, which is potholes, streetlights, right, and buses, but it must be important enough that it has cabinet weight. It will get done. You will see Barbados take that turn. And I propose tonight, Chad, you know what I'm talking about, that we have within government a GDPR officer. And that person would ensure one, government themselves are compliant too. Because I am worried about the immigration department, to be quite frank with you. I'm also worried that there is no liaison between government, the private sector, and the NGOs. Someone has to take the lead. Right now, what the gentleman is saying is, who do we go to? Because if someone is not responsible, just like how my panelist said, there is a data privacy officer in the company. If there's no GDPR data privacy officer in government or somebody responsible for it, you're now looking around the whole country to see who is responsible. And at the end of the day, that's a recipe for disaster, because then everybody's looking to someone else for the answer.
Okay,
Yeah.
My name is Edwin Workman. I just have a slightly varying point of view to everything that's going on here. Whenever the developed countries or the colonial past sees that there are opportunities for the downtrodden or the developing to catch up, to catch a breath, they come up with something to kick them down. And this is, to me, is just another example in a long list. They dress up. I was just took a pain to try to write down some of these examples that I can give, but then I got the mic, so I can do it. So I can give a number of examples, and they all come from, let's take for one, GDP. The measurement of a country's development is GDP, and therefore IMF and World Bank uses this and so forth and so on. Way back in the 45, 50s, they used that to decimate Central American countries and us, all right? And now they decide that they're changing it to some other metrics. Recently in the US, it was, they have what the FCC is trying to just change, internet neutrality, or net neutrality, right? So basically, now if you want to become another Google or another Facebook, it is a hell of a lot more difficult now. If every country in the world was to pass this law, how you can become a Google or Facebook in the time frame that it took them to become a Google or Facebook, all right? It can't happen. Because before they could have gotten the information, used the information to build themselves, whether it be Uber or whatever the case may be, build themselves, and now that they have the money and the technology, they can comply. You can try to do it now. This, to me, is just another example. But unfortunately, we don't have the power, so we have to comply. Another example.
I just want to pick up on that point because what I can see where you are coming from, but as a Caribbean resident, we have kicked ourselves in the butt as often as we have been kicked down. The Caribbean has suffered not one, but 3 major breaches of offshore institutions. The Panama Papers, the offshore leaks from Bahamas, and the Paradise Papers from Bermuda. We don't help ourselves when we let those things happen. The Caribbean has had opportunities to build new pathways for the internet and to look and see where the future was and say, hey, we ought to aim here. And the Caribbean governments have not. When those breaches happen, most of them occurred in 2016. At the same time, the GDPR was being discussed. Honestly, none of us should be in this room right now having this discussion if even one person in any administration in the Caribbean had taken the time to look and say, we just had the information of the Prime Minister of the UK and how his offshore companies leaked. Lord God, let us save what remains of our international business community and put in a data protection officer or some sort of regulation to protect the data of these people. We did nothing.
As an example, this whole thing about international business and offshore stuff, the city of London is the biggest offshore center in this world. And they have laws that say that nothing they do can be, that they don't have to be transparent. But it's the same country that pushes all the laws that we got to be transparent with FATCA and that type of stuff. FATCA and all that does not apply to the city of London, right? Because those facilities are already set up and established, all right? So it's just another way. But anyhow, we digress. I just wanted to put that point out there.
Okay, Edwin, I'll just respond. There are number of philosophical arguments out there as it relates to this, but there are a couple of things I just want to remind you of. The number of breaches that have been occurring worldwide has been on the increase, and you know the EU decided they want to do something about it. All right. The other thing you just heard, we too suffered our breaches. And if you look at the actual regulations, there are a number of things that we really lack. Now, in the US and in the EU, when certain things occur, then citizens or those affected or potentially affected are notified. Here, if a company suffers a breach, as an example, and your, let's say, credit card information is at risk, nobody, as far as I know, notifies you of that. They may notify the bank. So with 12 or 13 months to go before your credit card expires, the bank graciously determines in some nice language why you need to have a new credit card. All right. And we know that banks don't just get up and be generous and issue anything new for absolutely no reason at all, except that they love you so much and they figure you should have a nice, pretty credit card because the one you have now, isn't beautiful enough. So those are things. And, I couldn't put everything in the presentation, but there have been surveys, not one, several surveys that have been done. And citizens around the world have generally responded that there's a lack of trust. When, you go to buy something or hire purchase, and the only way you get it is if you provide all that information they want. But citizens are not that comfortable, and each time there is notification of a breach somewhere, they're less comfortable and less trusting and feel less confident. And they said, they don't know where the information really goes, who sees it, what they do with it. And certainly here we have no recourse. You can't walk down to any store and demand to know where your data went. And when you finish paying off, you can't go and say, well, destroy all my data. If the retailer decides to, comply with what your request is, then that's entirely up to them. There's no regulation that forces them to do that. So there are real reasons. I'm not belittling, your arguments, but I'm saying in addition to those, there are real tangible reasons why the GDPR has been developed.
All right, two final questions. One, and another, gentleman want to make a mention.
Good evening, everyone. Christopher Durrell. I want to commend the board for having this event. I think it's a fantastic opportunity to speak about GDPR. What I would like, if you can, is we are IT professionals. And most of what you're saying, this is a business problem. Without government, we spin it up in mud. What would you recommend to IT professionals today as a takeaway from this? What are we supposed to do in terms of getting this effected?
Okay, I'll go first. As an IT professional, I suggest that depending on your perspective, if you're working for a company, I suggest you raise it with your management team. Make sure they are aware. You can educate them or, get assistance with that, but make sure they are aware and try to be, as Stephen said earlier, be the champion of helping the organization to make the decision to start the compliance process, right? And of course, help them to understand that, yes, it must have the buy-in of the board and whoever is at the top, and that IT is a critical part of it because, we all use IT systems now to process data, store data, and all that is referenced within the GDPR.
I would recommend also that you slip this into the disaster recovery management process or the crisis management process, because it will be a crisis if someone from the EU comes knocking on your door and asking you for 10 to 20 million euros. So if you can raise this as a crisis point and show when you all have your annual or biannual tests how horribly as an organization you fail on this crisis point, then you will begin to see boards taking note of this failure point and moving on from there.
I would also say do the one thing that Barbadians don't like to do, right? I think one of the most effective things that the United States Congress has to deal with is the amount of paper and the amount of writing from their constituents happens on a daily basis. I would bet that most people don't call ministries and complain about situations in a way where it's systematic. One body calling is always the annoying person, right? Versus you just mentioned a professional where you speak and say, well, look, my organization is dealing with this. We went to a meeting here today, And we want to see you as a professional and your organization that government take the lead on this. And don't let it be just BIPA, but let it be the fact that BIPA can now have 50, 60 letters backed up by individual companies saying that this exposure is the risk associated with this exposure is too high. All right, and we want government to lead this process, not to be the only aspect of it, but to take a lead. Next question, please. Unless Chad, unless you want to add anything to that. Okay.
Hey, good night. And I must commend you all guys also doing a great job putting on this forum. O'Neill King, sorry, Security Trade. Quick question. I got about 3 questions, but I'm going to limit it to 2. One, directed at Mr. David. You mentioned the GDPR compliance. I'm also aware of like the SOC 2 reports, pen testing, those kind of stuff. Is the GDPR compliance a one-stop shop for compliance in general? That's one question. You want to answer that first?
No, the GDPR deals with personal data only. The other types of data that you need to deal with, credit card and everything, isn't necessarily covered by GDPR. So at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense just doing your security, addressing GDPR, but you address GDPR, the other types of data that flow through your organization.
Got you, but because what I'm saying is that in regards to the GDPR, it pretty much covers the compliance, the security, and other factors that are covered across a spectrum of other tests. For example, you mentioned the ISO 27001.
Yeah.
All right? That and the SOC 2 and the GDPR. If you put the 3 of those together, there's not much difference. I mean, in some cases, you might find the ISO 27001 covers maybe a bit more or a bit less than the GDPR and vice versa.
Yeah,
so go ahead.
No, but the main thing to remember that GDPR is very narrow in what it's looking at. It only cares about personal data. That's the problem with it. It's very narrow.
Got you. Number 2, I don't see Mr. Chad, but anyway, I guess y'all guys can answer also. But he's from the legal fraternity. We're looking a lot at IT aspect and GDPR. In my industry, what I do is more of a physical. We mainly deal with physical boxes. So if you think about financial institutions, government organizations, physically that is us. Some of the means that the GDPR cover, are there any particular policies, or can you highlight some of the, like a broad spectrum of stuff in regards to the physical attributes to the GDPR that I may need to be aware of? Physically, not the IT. I'm also IT, but we're looking at physical now. Whether it be.
So
go ahead.
I'm going to put this on the record just in case I am not a lawyer.
Yeah, that's
Chad should certainly have insights on this that I cannot provide. However, you are actually, I believe you said you're from Secure Shred?
Correct.
Right, you are actually part of the key process known as the right to be forgotten. So what might happen is that when a company goes through its audit and it comes to what happens to the information, I believe for some financial institutions, they would say they have to hold information for 7 to 10 years. What happens to the information that complies with the GDPR, and that you would be one of those chains, and then you might begin to field requests from such organizations to say, yes, these boxes of data from A to E, year 2007 to 2017 were destroyed on May 15th at the incinerator or at the port or QEH or whichever. That is some request. That's a sort of request you might begin to see coming through to Secure Shred as people begin to audit their whole chain of control of information.
I understand you, but I must beg to differ when you say that we are part of the, what did you say?
The right to be forgotten.
The right to be forgotten. The reason being is that every single person in here, we're not going to get rid of our ID cards. We're not going to get rid of our birth certificates. Those are things that we as individuals hold close to us. Same thing with companies, organizations, whatever you want to look at. There is always going to be someone out there, whether it be third party, whether whatever pass on the responsibility, that you will always need a paper trail. No matter how you look at it, it could be stored in the cloud, the blood, whatever you want to. There is always going to be needed of a paper trail. Okay? So passing on, well, you didn't answer the question directly because you didn't outline the certain stipulation. Because, I mean, I've heard about GDPR, I've read about it, I've went through it with a fine-tooth comb, and a lot of the things speaks directly to the IT aspect of things, whether it be access information via the cloud, whatever the case may be. But in my industry, I mean, it's going to come at us. I'm telling you this, we're seeing a lot of stuff coming at us, but it doesn't speak directly to me, if you understand me. It doesn't come on and say, well, this is you, we need you to have swipe cards, we need you to have access controls, all of those kind of stuff within that, that GDPR.
Yeah.
But I wanted to, go ahead.
Okay, I just want to take you back to David's point when he responded to your first question, and that is the GDPR is quite narrow. As a matter of fact, one of the provisions of the GDPR is that you only collect the information that is relevant for the processing you want. So that is to eliminate persons now just deciding, well, I'll collect information on you. Okay, so you want to buy a fridge, and on the form is what color is your eyes, what color, you know, what's the color of your eyes, and things, and you have a right to question that if you're a EU citizen. You know, how is this relevant to me buying this fridge? Okay, so think of the GDPR within that context, just information, whether singularly or collectively, can identify you. All right, and that's what is focused on. So, for example, if you go to buy some shoes and persons collect your shoe size for your age, let's say, that may not be something that can identify you. They may be collecting that information to see what age groups are buying particular shoe sizes or some statistical information like that for marketing purposes or whatever. That may not be covered by the GDPR because it doesn't identify any specific individual. All right? So David's point was very relevant when you're thinking about the GDPR. It is just for personal identifiable information.
I want to wrap up now because we have a break and we can get to this discussion of the official structured perspective. Chad has to go right now. He's left some business cards for you just in case you want to have further follow-up from his perspective on the GDPR. And as I said, this is one of the few. But for the record, I mean, or you just want to say something, John, because
this is for the record. I just wanted to say, well, as a representative of the government, and the fact that you had mentioned that now we have a ministry with responsibility in technology, that minister will be aware of the GDP, right? I just wanted to say that. And I'm also thinking that, yes, this is not the end, okay?
Yeah.
But remember, ministers keep the policy. I don't want to say things.
Yeah.
Not civil.
I understand the protocol. Guys, thank you so much for coming out. This has been awesome. All right, and you know this is the first, so we hope to see you. Thank you for coming up. We hope to see you back real soon, where we can have another perspective on the GDPR, and maybe we can then have the EU here for the next one. So thank you again. Get home safe. And there's some refreshments at the back. Thank you again.